Hey guys, Sen here. Today I'm going to be ranking all the different troops and spells in the clan capital on a tier list. I'll be talking about what situations you can use each of them for, and comparing them based on how useful they are for two-shotting districts. Every troop is usable in the right situation, but some just feel more generally good than others. A tier and above are meta-defining troops and spells, B and C tiers are for strong picks in the right situations, and then D tier and below are for the ones that can maybe use a buff in my opinion. I'll also try to order things within their tier, but let's get into it. Starting off, we have the Barbarian. It's the first troop you unlock and they're a pretty simple melee unit. At higher levels, they don't really have many other uses than clearing trash to open up the map, but that's still a good niche to have. I'll almost always have one or two of them in my army camps, and I'm going to give them a solid C tier placement. Next, we have the Cannon Cart. I used to think that they were completely unusable after their nerf, but I've been giving them a try lately and they have not disappointed. If you've seen my attacks where I swag all of my spells, you'll see that they almost always involve Cannon Carts because Cannon Carts can just rip apart big open compartments that aren't well guarded by ground DPS. They are still base specific, but they're a lot more usable than I once thought, especially against Builder's Workshop, to where I think they definitely deserve at least a C tier as well. Now, the Hog Raider just feels like one of the most well-balanced troops in the clan capital. They're weak to splash defenses, especially the rocket artillery, but when you can set up the base and remove those on the first attack, Hog Raiders are one of the best finishers you can use. They definitely have a bit more of a learning curve in the capital because there's a lot of splash defenses that can outdamage your heal, but take advantage of their glide ability to stun critical defenses on the approach, and they'll cut through bases like butter. A tier. Actually, one of the best ways to set up your hogs are with public enemy number 1, the Sneaky Archer. Archers are the most meta-defining troop in the clan capital and are the reason why everyone sets their bombs to ground. I don't think they're the absolute strongest troop, but they are really oppressive and hard to defend. They're also the most boring troop to use, and you'll be sitting there for the whole 3 minutes to drop one pack of archers every 5 seconds, waiting for them to pick off defenses in their stealth and questioning your life choices. Other than for pushing into bases with rages and rams, sometimes you can use them to clear trash on the outside of a capital peak, but who really uses archers for any non-toxic purposes? S tier. Is what I would say, but my hand won't allow me to drag this icon any higher than an A, so I'm afraid that's where it's going to have to be. Next up, we have the Super Wizard, which I consider to be one of the most underrated troops in the clan capital. Most players think Super Wizards become completely unusable at higher levels, but I've used them with success against the best clans in the world, and they were the MVP in that Capital Peak 2-shot, which is the most viewed video on this channel. Super Wizards are one of the most satisfying troops to use when used properly to strategically take out high hit point buildings like District Halls with tons of defenses around them. Tank for the Wizards with Rams or Giants and watch as 10 buildings go down at once. I'm giving them a B tier, but I truly believe that they belong even higher in the right situations. And what makes the Archers and Wizards really work well is the Rage spell. Just like in the home village, the Rage spell is one of, if not the best spell in the clan capital. The damage and speed boost from the Rage is just so good at giving your troops the extra power they need to get through a high threat area of the base. Almost every troop benefits from Rage, and you can almost never go wrong with it. It's an easy S tier from me. On to the Rocket Loon, and I think you know where this one's going. The Rocket Loon is what started this channel, and it's still one of, if not the best strategies in the clan capital. Rocket Loons do so much damage and trade defenses so well, and they just work with my playstyle, which is picking apart bases. Rocket Loons, more than any other troop, rewards good planning and execution and is so fun to use. When you take down a max barb camp in 2 hits with them, you will feel like a god among gamers, so this one is going in the S tier. Now, the Giant is a generic tank with high HP and low damage. The main problem with the Giant in the clan capital is that defenses are so strong that ground smash attacks to try to beat through the base are just not that effective. Still, they're useful to tank for Wizards when you're trying to bomb the capital peak, and moreover for Hogs to tank big splash defenses. They're honestly not that useful in most attacks, but they can come in really handy in certain cases. I'm going to give them a low C. The Pekka in the clan capital is in a really terrible spot. Everything that it does, other troops seem to do better. Giants and Rams give you more HP per housing space when you need the tanking, and Wizards and Cannon Carts will offer you more damage when you can keep them alive. Pekka as a hybrid between melee tanking and DPS is just terrible when you take into account its awful stats. Pekka can't even one-shot most smaller defenses and just works way too slowly for how quickly it gets taken out. The death damage is equally as pathetic and won't kill just about any other even level defense. The biggest use for Pekka is when you need to tank a big splash defense like Blast Bow or Rocket Artillery for a longer time. While Giants give more HP per housing space, the Pekka still has more overall HP to where it can hold the attention of those defenses for longer, giving, say, your Hog Raiders more time to sneak in on top of them. I really think Pekka could use a stat buff. It's just really hard to justify her 40 troop space cost in her current state. D tier. Next up, we have the Battle Ram, and this might surprise you. I don't consider the Rocket Loon to be the best troop in the clan capital because that would be the Ram. The Ram is the clan capital equivalent of the Home Village Super Wall Breaker if the Super Wall Breaker was half the camp space, had tons more health, summoned additional troops upon death, and did stupid amounts of splash damage to surrounding buildings. And I'd argue that the Super Wall Breaker in the Home Village is already S tier. Clan Capital base builders put zap traps near walls because zaps are pretty much the only thing stopping rams from reaching their walls, but the thing is, rams are also the most efficient way to proc zap traps, and so the ram counters the counter to the ram. Of course, you can't bring an entire army of rams because they're still just wall breakers, but the value you get out of that 5 camp space is so absurd that it's almost always worth bringing a few. I don't hate rams like I do archers, but I would not be surprised if they do end up being nerfed at some point. They belong at the top of S tier. Ever since the minions got that damage buff a while back, they've been in a great spot. They're an air troop that clears trash and can sometimes even sweep through a bunch of ground targeting defenses. I use them a lot to distract air splash defenses for my rocket loons, and they have a lot of strategic value in air attacks, making sure you will almost never run out of time. Right now, they're a great support troop because everyone's bombs are set to ground and they never run into traps, but if archers ever get nerfed and more people start setting their bombs to air, the minions placement could change, but for now, it's a solid B tier. The thing with the lightning spell is that if Rocket Loon didn't exist, it would be low tier trash, probably in the D tier or even the jump spell tier. But since Rocket Loons don't need the damage and speed buff from Rage, and the heal spell isn't going to keep your loons alive through the powerful anti-air defenses in the clan capital, the only thing that makes sense to bring alongside your loons are zaps. And oh boy, do the loons and the lightning spells make for a serious combination. So much so that I'm allowing the lightning spell to ride on the coattails of the Rocket Loon all the way to S tier as well. This is probably the most underrated spell in the clan capital. Next is the heal spell, which is actually the first spell you unlock and a pretty good one at that. The main problem with the heal in the clan capital is that its healing is so weak and the defenses are so strong that even a single cannon can overpower the healing effect. At higher levels, it's mainly used for hogs to top them up through traps and smaller splash defenses, but it just does not have the same effect as it does in the home village. It's still an option to use when you don't need the damage boost a rage would provide, but I really don't see it much outside of hog attacks. Still, hogs in the clan capital are so good that I'm going to give the heal spell an A tier. Now we have the jump spell, and I wonder where this one's going to go. So the jump spell is by far the worst spell because it tries to compete with the ram in the wall breaking niche, and trying to compete against the most broken thing is never a good idea. Plus, your spell slots are more limited than your troop slots, so you have to make good use of them, and the jump spell is just not it. The only time I use jump spell is when I'm going for a rainbow swag and using all of my spells at the river, and that is just kind of sad. Jump tier. Now, the Super Dragon, much like the Pekka, is another troop that just gets really held back by its terrible stats. It has the ability to splash a bunch of 2x2 buildings that are touching each other, which is really nice, but because it just gets blown up by air defenses, it has a really hard time getting off its damage. That being said, in the last raid weekend, everyone took at least 24 attacks against us, except one clan that took 21 attacks using the same 5 Super Dragon, 8 Battle Ram army composition and just spamming them all in at once. So that one clan that was just spamming Super Dragons did better than everyone else using archers. So if you have clanmates that are really struggling in the clan capital and taking 5 or more attacks, consider just telling them this strategy and it might just work out for them. Oh boy, I know some of you guys were waiting for this one. The Mountain Golem. It's bad. It's like real bad. Not only is the Mountain Golem unusable trash, but the only players who use Mountain Golem are noobs who make it look even worse. It is by far the slowest troop in the game, clocking in at 4 move speed, so even though it has high HP, It just gets beat down by all those defenses that it's waddling towards. And don't even get me started on all those attacks against Dragon Cliffs where players send in their golems into Infernos and Super Dragons. At that point, it's just wrong and the golem deserves better. So just leave him be inside his Mountain Golem quarry at home base, because the 160 troop space for what little he's able to achieve is just never worth it. Now, the only question left is whether the Mountain Golem is worse or whether the jump spell is worse. And I'd argue that throwing away 160 troop space, which is almost your entire army, is worse than throwing away just 2 spells. And as a side note, I've seen clans run Mountain Golem jump against us, and let me tell you, it is pretty nice getting those 40 plus defenses in your defense log. Next up is the Fortress, and I gotta say those Larry parachutes that it sends out when it takes damage has got to be one of the funniest things in this game. Supercell really did a good job on that one, but other than its meme value, the Fortress is one of the best finishers in the clan capital. It's a bulky air troop that snipes defenses from range, which means it can snipe ground defenses away from any air fire. It's so good at sweeping through bases once you've cleared out a lot of air defenses, and you can support it with Rage or support it with Zaps and Rocket Loons, which is what I prefer. Just don't try to use it against bases with Inferno Towers, and be careful with time because the Fortress moves really slowly, but other than that, the Fortress sits comfortably in the A tier. Now, just like with the Super Wizard, the Skeleton Barrel is one of the most underrated troops out there. Against certain bases with poor splash coverage, it will absolutely rip them apart. And against real bases, the Skeleton Barrels do so well strategically tanking point defenses for your hogs that they are just a great troop to bring alongside them. They're a troop that require practice and planning, but once you get the hang of the Skeleton Barrel, you'll see that it can excel against so many different kinds of bases. But because they still are so weak to any splash defenses or traps, the highest I can justify giving them is a B tier spot. Lastly is the Frost Spell, and this is another one I almost never use. The main problem with the Frost Spell is that before CH10 with 7 spell slots, the Frost Spell takes up 4 of them and just does not leave you with enough left for any other big spells. The few times I have used it though, it's not felt completely worthless, but its capacity is really what's holding it back. For now, I'm just going to let it sit in the D tier. So there you have it. This is where I think all of the different troops and spells stand in the clan capital. Rocket Loons, Archers, Hogs, and Fortress are some of the top strategies, and then Wizards and Larrys are also pretty good troops to learn if you want to really master the game mode. Everything above D tier feels really good to use, just don't use that bottom tier. And let me know what you think in the comments below of this tier list. Do you agree, disagree, or something you think I missed? Do you think I did one of your troops too dirty or put something too high? Post it down below, but like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and take care.